The candle and the tidal wave.
I have already written this in my Wattpad account, but I thought I'd get more people interacting here. Please feel free to feedback. The harbor was dreadfully still, an unusual sight to see such a calm autumn night in one of the most busy coasts in all of Greece. The crisp air nibbled at the lighthouse keeper's sagging cheeks, bringing an unwelcoming taste of salt to his tongue. Yet he stood unaffected as he stared out into the unending dark of the sea ahead of him. Decades of work had eroded any trace of weakness in his body, much like the jagged rocks that the lighthouse stood precariously close to. Although his old age and deep chasms on his face caused by years of scowling, his shoulders still stood broad, his frame still that of a vigorous young man. Although his irritable temper and large stature, he was still not above the simple human comfort of enjoying warm tea while listening to the soothing sounds of the waves rocking against the shore. That is, until he noticed something that had happened to him only once before. Something that shook him to his very core, awakening a primal feeling of pure terror that could not be described in any meaningful way through simple words. The waves never crashed onto the shore. In fact, there was no waves. The ocean had fallen dead calm. Silence. Nothing but the absence of sound resonated in his ears, save the beating of his own frantic heart, and in that moment he knew what he had to do. He had to know how close it was. In mere moments, with agility only made possible to him by his sheer will to live, he had already prepared to fire his flare, and so he did. Like a piercing sword of crimson light, it cut through the darkness, searing a path through the sky, its radiance reflecting off the Dead Sea. Through its light it was revealed. There it stood, an amorphous mountain of slithering flesh, an agglomeration of appendages, eyes, mouths, and teeth where there couldn't possibly be teeth, stood towering above the sea like a toddler in shallow water. Its proportions incomprehensible, its form unknowable, as it shifted its features around its pulsating body of simply ineffable size, like a tumor of the sea, with the tormented screams of the disembodied heads that hung dotted across its surface echoed in response to the bright light. Although it writhed and twitched within itself, it did not approach. It simply let the flare get closer, until it was put out by one of its many limbs, like a candle's flame being put out by a tidal wave. The man, even with his near unbreakable composure, could do nothing but stare at the darkness in which the creature now hid in, pondering with his mouth agape what unholy machinations could create such a thing. Yet time was of the essence, and he was well aware of it. He had to leave. He had to leave and run as far as he could, as fast as his legs could take him, and then some more before the floor shook. In fact, everything shook, not just the lighthouse. Everything. The very seas started to undulate in a sickly rhythmical manner too. The man's dismay, it was moving. As the smell of rotten flesh intensified and the vibrations grew louder, he knew what awaited him. The of the seas, the dweller of the deep, the mountain of dead men, the kraken had come for him. Soon he'd be welded into its purple flesh, lined with hooks and spears and harpoons from its past fights, as well as mismatched members of its unfortunate victims still alive under the curse inflicted on them. He'd become one with the creature. A fate worse than any death he could bestow himself before it arrived. He looked down
At the stone pikes that lay just below the lighthouse. At that moment he knew what he had to do, and with little hesitation he did so.